that's the effect. So, unfortunately, it hurts the very people that they're trying to help. So that's the sad thing, is that, I believe a lot of liberals have good intentions. I'm not talking about the, progressive Marxists. They don't have good intentions. But there is a segment of Washingtonians that are the classic liberals, where they have good intentions and they kind of want more liberty. And you see them come out and protest against the drones, for example, even in downtown Seattle.
Yeah.
But they don't seem to grasp sometimes what some of their proposed policies will do. They don't seem to think two steps down the line. So on the minimum wage issue, for example, they don't understand that you'll end up with probably mechanized fast food, for one thing, and that will cause a whole lot of lost jobs.
Oh yeah. A lot of those jobs at the younger college age kids, they're just going to be found out of a job. It's gonna be
right, and they're having a tough enough time already. Right, yeah, and their unemployment rate's about 25%, I believe, in that 18 to 25 age range. So that's going to be even more of an uphill battle for them to get their toes into the workforce.
Well, they're certainly going to see some bad repercussions off of this.
Yes.
Another action, I guess we'll call it. I'm just kind of interested in knowing your take on it, and also the what you think the repercussions are. Was the initiative 502? Yeah.
Right, yeah, 502 about legalizing marijuana. So just as a recap, the voters had already passed an initiative to legalize medical use of marijuana several years ago, and so that was already in place. And the medical marijuana users were given a card by their doctors saying, how much they could have and how much they could grow, and so that was already in place. But this particular law just basically legalized use of marijuana. Now, that doesn't mean that you can drive high or go to work high or anything like that. That's still against the law, but the actual use was not. So it did pass, and I have to say, Steve, this is one thing where I have changed my views somewhat in the last several years on medical marijuana, and that's I used to be against it.
Yeah.
But
I kind of figured that you and I probably didn't agree on this issue.
Yeah. So you know me, I'm fairly traditional, and I was against these. I was concerned about, I had seen in my travels, particularly in the Middle East and Europe, I had seen cases where, not just cases, but I had seen clumps of kids gathered around street lamps in Amsterdam, for example, just stoned out of their minds, and just, I'm sorry, but they weren't enjoying life. Okay? And so that was the mental image I had of marijuana use, and that, and, frankly, I've had some friends who got into it, and then it was kind of a gateway drug for them. I'm not saying it always is, but it certainly was for them.
Right.
So it led to increased problems. Well, I did have a number of constituents approach me and tell me why they were using medical marijuana and the effect that it had on them. And I heard enough personal stories that I became convinced that this should be legal to, golly, if something's going to quell your nausea during chemo, why not make it available to them? I don't see any reason why not to. So the problem comes with the new law. It triggered some unforeseen discussion. And so, for example, last year there was a bill to put the medical marijuana users into a database to track them and keep them separate from the recreational marijuana users. Now, that I find absolutely horrifying.
Yeah.
Another unforeseen repercussion was that the federal government, of course, still says that marijuana is illegal. So our laws in Washington are in direct contrast, opposition to the federal laws. Well, you would think this wouldn't be a big problem, except the feds apparently went into some people's homes in Spokane and took their guns because they were on the medical marijuana list. They had cards, and they knew, and they were also gun owners. So all the feds had to do was match up their records. And number one, the red flag is, oh, so those records do exist for both. There are lists.
Yeah.
Okay. Number two, these people said, but I'm not breaking any laws. And the feds simply said, well, you're breaking our laws.
Yeah.
So it's like, wow, that was kind of
I think as more states change their attitudes on it and start to legalize or decriminalize, either way you want to go, the feds will eventually, you would think, back down.
Give in to the pressure from the states.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's...
Yeah, that's a possibility.
The whole legalization issue, for me, goes back to another control issue. The government wants to control you. They want to control what you do. They want to control what you say, what you own, what you ingest in your body. And it's just another thing that I don't think is the proper role of government in the first place.
Right.
I'm not, legal or not, I'm not going to do it. It's not my thing. But I don't think somebody in Washington, D.C., or in Olympia, Washington, or Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, should be telling my next-door neighbor, you're not allowed to smoke that. It just goes back to a control issue.
Yeah, it does. I can definitely understand that point of view, and most of the time that is my framework of, should government even be in charge of this issue, whatever the issue is. The problem comes with, taxpayers are paying for treatment and foster care of the kids who are left in the cold when their parents get hooked on drugs. So a lot of taxpayer money does go towards fixing the problems that are caused by drug addiction.
I can see that. But at the same time, I guess the discussion that needs to be had is it more costly for the taxpayers for it to be legal, and those things happen that you mentioned, or is it more costly now with the billions and billions of dollars spent on the drug war and spent incarcerating and imprisoning, sometimes for 20 plus years, nonviolent drug offenders. So, I mean, it's just a discussion to have,
Yep, and that's a good discussion to have. I haven't seen hard figures, contrasting both, but that is definitely a question worth asking.
Yeah.
So I think another kind of consequence that needs to be worked out is there currently, at least in my county, Snohomish County, there are some grow and production facilities for marijuana that have started. They've been approved by the Liquor Control Board in Olympia, and to go ahead and build. And they met the requirements at the county level as far as the building regulations. So they on the properties, and so they went ahead and started building. But in some areas, they're right next to houses. So they're in what's called the R5 zoning, which is rural 5 acres. So you've got in some cases, houses that have been there a long time, a neighborhood, and they're right next to now a large operation that's going to have trucks coming in and out, big trucks.
Yeah, that's when you get into some local zoning issues. So that's definitely
runoff, pesticide or all kinds of chemicals going into a lake nearby, and it's like, wait a minute. We need to maybe rethink exactly where we want to allow these, grow operations to be.
Absolutely.
So that's another issue I'm working on right now.
Great. Well, Elizabeth, we're actually coming up out of time. I want to thank you for coming on tonight, and hopefully we can have you on again sometime and talk about what's going on up there in Washington State on a more frequent basis.
That'd be great, Steve. I look forward to that.
Kind of miss what's going on up there.
Thanks for having me on your show, and I want to encourage all your listeners to pay attention to whatever state they're in. Pay attention to what their legislators are doing, because the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and legislative sessions will be starting up again in January in probably most states. So they should keep tabs on what their legislators are doing.
Perfect. All right.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on.
You bet. Have a good one.
All right. That was Elizabeth Scott from Washington State. She's been a state legislator up there for a few years. I want to say this is her second re-election, if I'm thinking correctly. Maybe not. Maybe this is her first re-election. Anyway, but yeah, if you don't know anything about me, I actually moved to Oklahoma, or moved back to Oklahoma after spending about 12 years up in Seattle, Washington, and that's where I met Elizabeth, and she kind of keeps me updated to what's going on, and hopefully we can keep her to keep doing it on our show and have her back occasionally. Anyway, that is it for tonight. We're done. Next week, I've got a interesting show coming planned. That I got a guy that was a refugee. I'm probably he was kidnapped in Syria, and he escaped or was rescued. He's going to come on and tell a story next week, and he'll be able to tell it better than I don't have all the particulars yet, but it should find it very interesting. So you've been listening to Liberty Unfiltered. I'm your host, Steve Long. This is Vigilant Liberty Radio. We're also streaming on K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network. So stick around here on Vigilant Liberty Radio. We've got Amy coming on with Modern Comments. Thanks for tuning in, folks.